Why do you think so many people think injuries are bad?
First off, there's pain. Like, shoot, like my back hurts. So and then you start thinking, okay, do I need to go see a doctor? Do I need to go to emergency room? Like, this anxiety just kicks in because you just start to panic. Because you're like, to them, it's like, well, I can't get to my goal now. Whatever their goal was, of losing weight, getting stronger, if they're an athlete playing whatever sport, that gets taken away from me because I can't do that.
I want to say 80 to 90%, you are going to experience some type of injury as you start to lose weight again. I see so many people leave gyms because they think injuries are a bad thing. And you need to look at it in a more holistic perspective because it's telling you something. Why do you think injuries are actually a good thing?
You can learn a lot of good things from being injured. Think of it this way, like a lot of times people come into the mindset of injury, it's kind of like a stop sign. Yeah. They're like, shoot, I'm hitting the end of the road with this, I gotta stop. And it's like, no, injury doesn't mean a stop sign. It's more of like a recalibration point.
When I experience an injury, I have 4 steps. The first step is assess. The second step for me is to accept. The third step is to adjust. And then the last step is to... Injuries can feel like the end, but what if they're just the beginning? Today's episode, I got Coach Jacob here with me, and we are going to be talking about why this experience, although may be painful, can be your setup instead of a setback. So, welcome, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Royce.
Yeah, so guys, if you guys don't know who Coach Jacob is, he is like one of the few people that take care of me when I'm broken. So he's our in-house physical therapist. If you guys are visiting us for the first time, we own 2 gyms here in Las Vegas. I've been a trainer for nearly 2 decades. I do a lot of crazy workouts, and anytime I'm broken, this is the guy that fixes me. So before we dive into the questions, what's it like? Like, I come in every week with a new injury, and you're always just smiling every time. What's that like, really quick?
Dude, it's been fun. I mean, it challenges me, but it's fun because, I mean, it's always you come in and you're like, it's not like, hey, Jacob, I ran like 5 miles, my foot hurts. Yeah. It's always like, hey, Jacob, I did like 100 times that and it hurts. And I'm always laughing. I'm like, man,
it's pretty obvious.
Because you're one of those people that's like, you push your body to the limit all the time. Yeah. Like, I mean, what was the last one?
Torn or not torn, but it was my
after your
we
pull-ups.
Thought it was my lats.
Yeah, after your pull-ups, right? Like, so, like, I mean, like, if you guys follow Coach Royce, I mean, you know, like, he did the world record for weighted pull-ups in an hour. Yeah, he did what, 6:20, 24 or something like that,
somewhere around there. Yeah,
and it's like afterwards, like, of course, like, he came in, he's like, yeah, it hurts, I can't do a pull-up.
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, like, most people probably aren't doing 600 pull-ups in a year, let alone in 60 minutes.
But prior to that, it was like I was doing 500 a day just to build up the volume. Yeah. And then you're like, all right, what's going on? And it was like, it kind of hurts somewhere around like 420. Yeah. And then you're like, it's 400 reps, man. Yeah. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. No, but it's been fun, man. It's for you. It's always, I feel like it's always about balance. We're always like, okay, like you're doing this much like pulling. It's like, all right, let's try to balance that out and see if we can. Yeah, just make the body feel good because you're doing like one movement a ton. All right, we got to balance that out, kind of thing. Yeah. So,
and guys, I like Jacob because he's not like, just stop doing what you're doing. That's like one of my biggest fears is talking to a doctor and just being like, it's over for you, which I've had many experiences with, but it's really refreshing because you're just like, cool, this guy's not going to stop. So let's just keep figuring it out, see what we can do to mediate this damage. Yeah. And, it's really cool to have you on our team. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed being here. It's been great.
Okay, so let's go through this because we deal with a lot of clients in their weight loss journey, and some of them are gaining muscle. I think there's a natural progression where they start to do more with their bodies. Yeah. And one of the unfortunate events, which I think is always inevitable, especially if you're trying to get fitter and fitter, is an experience with injuries. Yeah. And I think it can be good. But before we talk about the good, why do you think so many people think injuries are bad?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been thinking about this. I mean, I think it comes down to, well, first off, there's pain. Like pain 100%. Pain just sucks. Like
that's what I wrote down for one of mine.
Yeah. I mean, like there's kind of like that pain soreness you get when you're pushing your body to the limits, right? Like,
that's the cool pain.
Yeah, I feel like that's like, especially people in fitness or in athletes, like they kind of learn to enjoy that. But then there's that difference between that pain and like no, your body's kind of like breaking down pain.
Yeah.
And it slows you down. I think that's, with that pain comes like anxiety, and a lot of anxiety and worry about that. Cause then, I mean, like, I've been there. I'm sure you've been there, like doing something
there every week,
and like you're there every, but you start hurting, and then your mind just starts racing. You're like, oh shoot, like my back hurts.
Yeah.
Oh shoot, did I blow out a disc? And then you start thinking, okay, do I need to go see a doctor? Do I need to go to emergency room? Like, this anxiety just kicks in because
you start to panic.
You just start to panic because you're like, well, this movement used to be really easy. Now it hurts, and you're like, shoot, I really broke something.
Yeah.
Right. I think so. Like, and like that I think that anxiety and fear kind of comes in with like,
I agree,
lack of knowledge. Not like they just don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%. That's why I'm more comfortable going into injuries, because I'm like, he's gonna find something that I don't find. Yeah. So there's the anxiety of like knowing going into it, he's gonna find something that I haven't been working on.
Yeah.
So that reduces it a little bit.
Yeah.
The way I describe the two pains is like, there's the good pain where you feel it after like rep 8 or rep 300 plus, maybe, right?
Yeah, in your case.
Yeah. But then the other pain is like rep 1, or it's not, we haven't even started the rep and it's already in pain. Like that for me is like injuries for me. Like that's how I define them. If I was going to tell someone, like, well, how do you know it's good pain or bad pain? Good pain is like rep 8, 9, 10.
Sure.
You feel the burning sensation. Bad pain is when you grab it for the first rep and it's like debilitating, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I want to explain, because there's two major categories, and you can kind of add more to this. There's like the catastrophic type of injuries, and then there's the mechanical. If you were going to describe it to someone, like what the main differences are, because I think I want to talk about more mechanical, not so much the catastrophic. I think that's a tough pain, and we can talk over that an entirely episode for an hour. So what's the difference?
Yeah, so I would actually use different terminology instead of catastrophic and mechanical. Okay. Like I think of it more of like traumatic versus overuse. Like that, in my mind, those are probably like the two biggest categories when it comes to injury. Like, so traumatic being like, all right, you got tackled, hurt your knee, or like car accident, or you fell, something like that. Some kind of traumatic event led to the injury. Whereas where I think when you say mechanical, correct me if I'm wrong, like I think of overuse,
100%.
Where it's like you're just doing too much and things start to kind of
break down,
kind of break down, right? So like that's what I would say is like you got traumatic, you got overuse. Overuse, like traumatic is like there's so many variables that go into it, right? Like it's hard. Whereas overuse, I mean, you can break it down to like just like volume, load, and intensity type stuff. Right.
I feel like the mechanical side is easier to fix than the traumatic side. Oftentimes you'll need surgery of some sort, right? Yeah. So that's why I really want to dive into this. When you think of things that are mechanical, how likely do you think you can fix it?
I mean, there's always a good chance. I mean, the heart, like I'm going to sit here and be like the clinician that I am. Like there's always going to be, it depends, right? Like, I mean, anyone that goes into like any kind of medical field, like that's their favorite answer is like, well, it depends.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, overuse injuries, like very, very easy to take care of. And the fact that like we can fix them. Now the timetable of that is always going to be variable.
Yeah.
Right. Like it just depends on like what the person's doing, what they're outside of their movement, like how's their nutrition, how's their sleep, how's their stress management, like that goes into, I mean, that fits into traumatic injuries too. Just anyone recovering, like, you can't just think of what are they doing. It's like the whole person.
For sure.
That makes sense.
That does make sense. I want to add one more thing, because like the why people deem it to be so bad, and you can probably maybe add to this. I always perceive someone that is injured to be weak for a longest time, like. At least in my mind. Now I don't believe that. Yeah. Some of the strongest athletes, you point them to me, I'm going to tell you they've probably had hundreds of injuries. That's like now my perception. But in the past, prior to all of my injuries, I would always think that, oh, if you're injured, it's because you're a weakling. Yeah. Like, you want to add to that? Is that like a thing? Like, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's not necessarily truth to that, but I mean, like, the thing is, injuries happen, and it's not necessarily because you're weak. Maybe you're just kind of approaching whatever you're doing wrong, or you're doing too much too soon, kind of jumping into it too quickly. I mean, a lot of overuse injuries I see, a lot of it is just like they just ramp up too quickly. Like they catch on fire with like an activity, and they're like, oh, I just love this, I'm going to do more and more and more and more of it. And they ramp up too quickly, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh shoot, like I went from playing one game of pickleball a week to now I'm playing like 10 or 15 and my shoulder hurts or my knee hurts, right? It's like they just ramp up really quickly. So
the whole weakness thing, and you're like, there is some truth to it. And do you mean by like there are muscles that may be weak that could be contributing to it?
But I mean that's the thing is like as humans is like we're always going to need to be working on something. Like most people generally I can say is like, yeah, most people can get stronger. Yeah. Like myself included, right? Like I'm always like if you think you're strong enough, it's like, well, you probably could push yourself in some way. You just don't know about it yet.
Yeah. And I think the natural progression of strength is you'll get really, really strong. You'll peak. Yeah. And then what ends up happening is you hit injuries. Some form, it could be large, but a lot of times it's very like small. Yeah. And if you catch those, your cycle can go faster and faster and faster. And that's why I like always following up with you. Yeah. So another big thing that I think people hate experiencing injuries is because they feel like they're going so far back. Yeah. Yeah. But in reality, you'll see people jump back. You've been taking care of Kyler, and I think this guy's he's already jumping higher than I am. I'm like, how? He just ruptured his Achilles tendon like 5 months ago. Yeah. And explain that, like, do you think that happens oftentimes, like when people get injuries, they spring back and they get stronger, and then it just changes over time? Like, what are
I mean, I think we'll dive into it when we get to like talking about like, hey, how can injuries come good for you, right? It's just like, I mean, ideally you come back stronger from an injury, right? Yeah. Like if you find that person that can help coach you and help guide you in that direction, like figure out what you need to fix while you rehab or heal from whatever injury it is, so that you come back stronger, not just, you don't just come back the same person. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Like I think that's the big thing with injury is like, you got to kind of assess where you're at, like start working on other things that you can't because you're injured. Yeah. Like, right. Like, okay, you injured your shoulder. Okay. Like maybe you can't like do any like pressing movements, but it's like, you can work on like thoracic mobility. You can work on like your lower body strength, kinetic linking, all this kind of stuff, so that you can get back to, when you're back to that point where like you can press something again. It's like, you're not the same individual. You have like a stronger foundation.
100%. Right? I want to put this in practice because we did this with my first week. I did 500 pull-ups every single day. Yeah. And then it was like my left one. And then you were like, dude, you need to strengthen your rotator. So I started doing some of the rotator cuff work. Yeah. And I had to kind of slow down my pacing. I wasn't going as fast on the 500. Yeah. Just so I can adapt that. And then the second week and then the third week, it got easier and easier and easier. Yeah. And that is an example of what injuries can do. Yeah. So they'll tell you like, hey, you suck. Your rotator stability is awful. Like this is like, let's work on that. And what's crazy is I'm not doing 4 hours of rehab work. Right. It's like 1 or 3 movements that I implemented instead of just me doing like walking high knees on my warm-ups. Yeah. I'm just doing the stability rotator stuff to replace it. Yeah. And it can have massive impacts in your performance. Yeah. So that's like the main thing of, let's go dive in, because I feel like we just jumped into the second part of the question. Yeah. Why do you think injuries are actually a good thing? Yeah.
So I don't know if I'll ever sit here and say like injuries are good, right? Because like injury, but you can learn a lot of good things from being injured, right? Okay. And like I think we kind of hit on it. That first one is just like kind of reassessment, right? Yeah. I like think of it this way. Like a lot of times people come into the mindset of injury, it's kind of like a stop sign. Yeah. They're like, shoot, I'm hitting the end of the road with this. I got to stop. And it's like, no, injury doesn't mean a stop sign. It's more of like a recalibration point. It's like no, like, because again, I think we didn't quite touch on it, like why people are so afraid of injuries. Because like another big thing is like to them, it's like, well, I can't get to my goal now. Like whatever their goal was of losing weight, getting stronger, if they're an athlete playing whatever sport, like they get injured, like shoot, that gets taken away from me because I can't do that now. And so they think, well, that goal is done.
Yeah.
But really, it's like, no, that goal still exists. We just have to kind of recalibrate, and we have to kind of get a different path.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest things you can take away from dealing with injury is like, you gotta reassess
Mm-hmm.
where you're at, learn your body, and like, what do I need to do
Mm-hmm.
to get back on track for my goal?
Yeah.
Right.
There's this false, like, almost dream that weight loss is going to be very linear. Like, I'm just going to cut weight, you know, I'm going to eat a little bit better. I'm going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And we forgot to put the little, like, side thing that comes up. Injuries will pop up somehow.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's minor, major, most of the time, if you can find it, it's minor.
Yeah.
It only becomes major, at least for me, when I don't address it. When I'm just like closing my eyeballs, I'm taking like ibuprofen, and I just keep doing the same movement. I'm doing the same warm-ups, the same cool downs, and then bam, I have these hamstring tears or bicep tears.
Yeah, like I always think like it would be really nice if like our bodies were like a car and a check engine light comes on, and it's like, oh, you got to pay attention to stuff. The thing, like, we don't have like something that's gonna, like, we're not gonna have a light that comes on and show all that. But I mean, like, most of the time, like, injuries are preceded by like your body kind of giving you like warnings here and there, right? Like, feeling more worn down, stress is like super high, like even those little aches and pains, like, they come more natural, and you're just like, oh, that's just normal. Yeah, it's like, if you listen, your body's telling you stuff, but it's hard because you have to learn your body and figure out like, okay, what is my body telling me that I kind of need right now?
Most people will look at the check engine light and they're like, I know how to fix this. They go in, they take out the alternator.
Yeah, sure.
I think we should put oil on this thing. Let's just rub oil on it.
Sure.
I think it's going to work. Maybe we should throw some gasoline on it too. That's like what I did in the past.
Sure.
So I'm guilty of it.
Yeah.
That's why it's so nice to just have you on there and actually like, wait, what's going on here? Because I'm about to pour some oil and gasoline on here.
Yeah, it's funny. So like, you have those people, but then you also have those other people on the other end of the spectrum. Like, the warning light comes on, and they're like, they get into panic mode. They're like, oh my gosh, shoot, like, my car is done. Like, when the engine light comes on, my car is done. I can't use
replace
it. I gotta get a new car. And it's funny because like, this is me. I hate cars. Like, I wish I knew more about it. I need to learn more about them. But like sometimes I find myself when we're talking about my car, like, I almost react like that. Yeah. And it's like, but like, there's people that react like that when it comes to their own body. Like, they're very, very in tune with how their body feels. And like, a little thing comes up and they're like, oh shoot, I'm dying. Like my hip hurts. I'm never going to be able to squat again. And it's like, no, like, again, like, that's why it's like, you take that time to reassess and learn your body and be like, okay, what do I need to do to kind of figure this out?
100%.
Right.
One of the biggest mistakes I think is a lot of times they get to that path and they just stop everything entirely. Yeah. And one thing that's nice about, like, with our group and people coming into it, they'll come in with a back tweak or a knee pain or a shoulder pain. And we're already coming in with a smile because right away we're getting signals of what things to work on and what things to address. Right. So it's like, that's one of the cool things about injuries. Why injuries can be a good thing is now it gives us a platform to speak. Yeah. It gives us a platform to be like, hey, maybe we should do soft tissue work. Yeah. Maybe we should do some stretching for once, you know? Yeah. If I took away all of my injuries, I would have never been introduced to soft tissue work. Yeah. Cupping, meditate, all of these things that I consider recovery. Yeah. I would never have it on my tool belt.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually what I had kind of when you asked me these questions. Like, my second point was like, these injuries, like overuse injuries, particularly, like, again, we're not talking about traumatic injuries, but overuse is like, it kind of forces recovery, right? Like, and you see it. I mean, like, most people coming in here, like, middle age, right? Like, they're just getting back into fitness and all this stuff, and their only idea of training was what they probably did when they're like in high school.
3 sets of 10 bench press.
So, or like, but right, they come in here and they're like, well, I'm just gonna do like I'll do the same thing I did when I was in high school. But now they're like 40 years old. Yeah. And their body's not built the same. It's not. The same, yeah. Right? So like they kind of, when you deal with injuries, it kind of forces them to learn recovery and be like, hey, this is actually a better way to train. It's not just go, 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 go. Yeah. It's like it forces them into that stuff you're talking about, like that more mobility work, just making sure everything moves well, all that kind of stuff. Right.
And it's so key. And you're right. Like, they're working out in high school. They're doing the same thing. they're fixated in an environment where they're working and they're kyphotic. Their shoulders are not the same.
Yeah.
Their hip is not the same. They're working out with a 40-pound weight vest on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not going to be doing the same things. Of course, things are going to be breaking down and needs time.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this episode is so important, because actually I'm more of a, like, I want to say 80 to 90%, you are going to experience some type of injury as you start to lose weight again. Right. Yeah. And I see so many people leave gyms because they think injuries are a bad thing. And a lot of times they blame the coach, or they blame the Zumba class or CrossFit class, or even they'll blame the therapist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it just takes time. You need to zoom out and you need to look at it in a more holistic perspective, because it's telling you something. And I love injuries because oftentimes I didn't know my rotator cuff was weak. Mm-hmm. I didn't know my hamstrings were weak. I didn't know my glutes were weak. Things that I didn't see in front of the mirror. I thought I was strong, but then you look at the back part of me and it's like, you didn't do anything on that side, dude.
Yeah.
So,
and so like the nice thing too is like, cause like, I think like, yeah, you, as you're moving, people are active, like deal with injuries. Mm-hmm. But the nice thing is like, if you go about it right way with the first one, you can kind of carry the stuff that you learn in. So like for like you example, like, right, like what the first thing I helped you with was your back, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I tweaked my back. Yeah.
So it kind of tweaks your back, helping you with that. Like, did you carry any of the things I taught you from that into like your future training? So it's like, okay, you experienced one injury, but like you learned some things, some principles, and like how to train, how to balance things, and kind of just go about it differently. Mm-hmm. And you carry that into other aspects of your training, 100%. Right? And it's like, so it's like you had one injury, you learned from it. How much did you learn from that prevented future injuries?
Yeah.
Like, right. Like, I mean, it's like theoretical, like I don't have an answer for you, but I can guarantee you it's like you learned stuff about yourself that set you up for success. So you avoided future injuries.
100%.
Does that make sense? So yeah.
This is so good, because this is what I tell people. Fitness is not linear. It's actually compounding.
Yeah.
Like, your growth in the fitness world is never linear. Your weight loss is never linear. It's actually exponential, because you start to stack skills.
Yeah.
You start to stack confidence. You start to stack knowledge. Mm-hmm. You also I start stacking resources. Yeah. I have a massage therapist. I have a physical therapist that I believe in. I have a holistic nutrition person that I believe in. Yeah. And you just start to get fitter and fitter and fitter. And that skill you're talking about, I'm going to sound psycho here, but then I was doing those 1,000 burpees.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then my back lit up like probably day 30.
Yeah.
And I decided to do 90 days. And one of the things you told me was you need to do some Cobra stretches. And I was like, why do you got to do Cobra stretches? That's like, shouldn't I do like a this? He was like, no, let's look at your movement as a whole. What does your movement look like? And I was like, oh, you're right. I'm never really completely standing up and getting this full extension, where I'm like, oh, normal. I was in my head, I always hurt my back when I'm rounding my back.
Yeah.
And now you're telling me to like hyperextend it so I can get all of this stretch back, and it started to like alleviate the pain.
Yeah.
And now I'm taking that into a lot of my warm-ups. Right. You know, in fact, I'll do it sometimes when I'm just watching TV. It's like, I think I need to stretch that, and I'll stretch it.
Yeah.
And then bam, it's inside all of my warm-ups now.
Yeah.
So I think you're 100%. It's compounding, which is very cool. Like, if you guys are getting injured, whatever skill you're learning now is going to carry over for the rest of your fitness history.
Yeah.
Or in the future, that history.
Yeah.
Is there any other things of why you think injuries are a good thing? Can be a good thing?
I mean, I think there's a lot to talk about, like just the mental toughness, right? Just like fortifying your mind. And I think you come across like these like bumps in the road. It really kind of challenges you on like that mental toughness. And like, if the goal that you're actually trying to go for is actually a goal you want.
Yeah.
Right. Cause I find I've done it where like I've set a goal, I hit my first obstacle, and I'm like, that goal wasn't really that important to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, I'm just going to switch gears and not do that.
Yeah.
Right. So you find out those goals that are like really important to you fairly quickly when you're dealing with an injury, because you're like, okay, am I actually going to take the time to learn what I need to learn from this to keep going? Or am I just going to give up this avenue completely?
This is so good. I'm glad you tapped into resiliency.
Yeah.
because every time I overcome some sort of injury, it not only bleeds into my fitness, I start doing things. It's like, what else is possible that's broken to fix? Can I fix my relationship? Can I fix like my finances? Like I thought my career was over with this back injury. Like it starts to build not only resiliency in the fitness side, it questions things. So that's where, again, another compounding effect. Yeah. That's why it's so important to have some of these experiences and then overcome it. Yeah. So here's a question. And this is just like me. If I took out all of the injuries that I experienced, do you think I would be as fit as I am now? Just in your humble opinion.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I'm not sure. I know for sure you wouldn't be the person that you are now. Yeah. Right? You take away those obstacles, those challenges. It's like you're a completely different person.
I'd be a docile flower.
Yeah. I mean, probably their answer is probably not. Right? Yeah. I mean, like, because you take away so much from that, and again, there's people that can come across injuries and not take anything from it. That's why I'm going to say like injuries aren't always good for you, because they're only good like it's always what you take from it and what you put into it, right? Like if you're willing to learn your body and do this stuff, then like absolutely you're going to learn some amazing things. Yeah. And so for you, it's like you've learned bits and chunks that you've been able to bleed into all other aspects of your lives. So like it's for sure they've changed you.
For sure.
And they made you better. Yeah. Right. So it's like I think it always comes down to, I mean, your mentality when you come across these.
So good.
Right.
Because I agree. Yeah. There's ones that you've handled both spectrums. You know, they get one injury, they get into a pill, and then it's just downhill. Yeah. And like, man, if they just prevented X, Y, and Z, I think they'd have an entirely different life outcome. Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, I agree. Like it's almost the mentality has to match the adversity.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
And luckily, I think my mentality just has always been there a little bit, just growing up, like your circumstances. We think some of these things that we like, all of the stuff that I thought was, man, I didn't have any of this, but I think it actually equipped me to handle a lot of these injuries. Yeah. Now that I think about it. Yeah. So. Yeah. Is there any other good things that come out to this aside from the resiliency? We did resiliency. It can. Oh, did we?
Assessment, force recovery,
like learning the other aspects of the holistic world. Yeah. How about? Can you talk about the weaknesses? Like when you see an injury, can you almost look at a person and be like, "Oh, we need to work on X, Y, and Z muscles."
Sure. So I mean, I think this kind of takes us into the next topic that we'll touch on here soon. Is like, especially when we're talking about mechanical or overuse injuries, typically they're not random, right? Like going back to like that check engine light. Yeah. Like typically you're gonna have signs and stuff coming up that like that happened before. Like you start to notice, or you start to classify it really as an injury, right? There's things that like again, like these injuries don't just pop up. Like you can see things before that. Yeah. And so like it does. It kind of takes a skilled eye and like being able to, like a good assessment, kind of looking at someone and be like, right. So like looking at like shoulders, like a lot of times people get pain with like overhead pressing, right? It's like, well, I mean, we can like doing a good assessment, looking at like how well they're moving, their back is moving, how strong the rotator cuff and all that kind of stuff is, kind of sets a good picture of, okay, well, like it's a little weak. Like we can address it now before it becomes an issue. Does that make sense? I don't know. I may have kind of tailed off there.
No, a little bit of question, but yeah, you're so like proper, man. I'm the opposite. Like, let's just throw stuff at it. Let's see if it breaks, and then we'll see if we can fix it. So here's a fun question. This question was an ad. If you had to, I mean, let's just say you were like transported into time. Okay. And the time that you're transported into is from 2000 to 2020, 2030. Okay. You know the technology that's involved. You know the science that's involved. And because we're talking about weak muscles. Okay. Okay. Right. Like, and you had to guess the top 3 weak muscles in this generation's not all of them are going to be like that, but you had to guess. You're like, okay, these are the 3 muscle groups that are often really weak.
Yeah.
And you probably need to strengthen it. What would those 3 muscles be?
Listen, if you're trying to lose weight, but you're just frustrated because you just can't seem to see any results, we would love to help you out. Now, we've been helping thousands of our athletes over the course of a decade by crafting personalized programs that are not only sustainable, but also effective. Now, if you're ready to transform your health, click on the show notes below, book a call with one of our coaches. We'd love to help you out. Now back to the show. Peace.
I mean, we're a very sedentary population now, right?
Yes.
Like we sit at desk jobs. So like, I think very 2 that are up there are probably going to be like core. So like core strength and endurance. Glutes are going to be up there. Man, hard pressed for a 3rd one. Yeah, I mean it's hard when you just have to pick 3. I'd feel pretty confident saying like those are 2 that I come across fairly often.
Yeah.
Like that are
the big ones all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, my 3 would be glutes, core for sure.
Yeah.
Like they don't even know how to use it.
Yeah.
And then the upper glutes, their T-spine, like they're
Okay.
like it's somewhat.
Yeah.
It's not in the best position, and there's
fair.
so many muscle groups back there, and I can see why you're like the
Yeah.
whole upper
Yes.
glute.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna combine that whole back as an upper glute.
Yeah. I was like, can we go like everything posterior chain here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's like I was hoping you'd answer some of mine, so I just don't feel dumb.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, you've been in this industry a long time. Like you see just as much.
That's all I do.
But it's like, yeah.
So why I asked that question, guys? Like, if you want to work on something pretty religiously, I think you should be building up your glutes a lot, right? Like, get some type of awareness on how to utilize your core correctly, and then always. It's really, when it comes down to one thing, posterior chain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Improve your posterior chain.
Me again. The reason why I said that is like because you already touched on it. Like we all end up here. And so like we get everything gets tight here, everything on the back kind of gets just weakened, lengthened and weakened. So it's like you want to
this is why I'm so excited with the new technology. You know how we see the old like 20 or 30 years ago where they're smoking cigarettes everywhere. And you're like, what are you guys doing? You guys are killing yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe 30 years or 40 years down the road, there's going to be these kids who are like, I can't believe you guys were like looking at screens like that.
Yeah, looking at screens or like you're sitting for 10 hours a day.
10 hours a day. Right. And I really do think there's going to be a technology boom where you're more upright, experiencing media, experiencing knowledge. Like you're going to have glasses. That's why they're having all these glasses.
Yeah.
And I'm optimistic that there will be a shift that maybe the weakness is only on the glutes and not on the thoracic spine, right? Hey, that'd be great. It's one less problem that we have to strengthen. So that's why I think it's really interesting. That's why I had to also close it in.
Yeah.
Because I'm not quite sure in the 1900s and the 1950s that glutes were the problem. You know what I mean? Or even the T-spine were the problem. In fact, when you look at some of those pictures of people in the past, they're all just they're all really tall looking. So I'm like, what?
Yeah.
We just got shorter as a population. So I think it's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's dive into the 3rd question because now we got the good and the bad. I'm going to share mine too, but I want you to share yours.
Okay.
When you experience a injury, like what is your framework? You might have a doctor's framework around it. But is it okay if I share my bro framework?
Go for it.
So like maybe you can dismantle it, but you can also add to it if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
This is why I love hanging out with these guys, right? So you have like your trainers and then you have your physical therapists. We have a really, really holistic team. We have our meditation coaches and it's like we got all of it.
Yeah.
So when I experience an injury, I have 4 steps.
Okay.
The first step that I do, and I have acronyms for it. All A's. Okay, so it's easy to remember. The first step is assess. The second step for me is to accept. The third step is to adjust. And then the last step is to add rehab. Okay. So let me explain mine, why this is important for me. And maybe you have a very similar framework. The first time I get injured is I assess the movement. Where's the pain? Like, what can I do with it? Like my lats, I was like, it's only bad when I'm like here, So I always assess it first, because sometimes when I assess it like last, or someone assesses it for me, then I don't move it at all.
Right.
But then I realize it has so many other functions. Like, oh wait, I can still do inverted pulls, right? So I assess it first, just on the movement side, but I also assess my stress load outside of here. Like, what's my stress out here? Like, am I carrying so much? What's my sleep pattern? That's typically, I attack both of those. If I'm stressed out of my brain and my sleep pattern is off, I have to address that. And then also, what's my nutrition like at the moment?
Yeah.
Am I drinking enough water? Am I eating enough protein? Am I skipping too many meals? I assess first.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that I do is accept. Some people accept first. I used to accept first. I was like, this is over. It's over. But then now I accept. I'm like, okay, I can't do overhead movements for the time being. Let's understand that. I also want to accept that maybe I am in a stressful season of my year at the moment. So I'll accept a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Right. And then the third thing is I'll adjust. And I'll normally just adjust my workout intensity. It's like, I'm not going to do any more pull-ups for the time being until Jacob says it's good to go. But I'm going to go do 1,000 lunges, something crazy. So I'm not going to completely adjust like to just rehab.
Right.
And I'm just going to adjust where am I going to put my energy towards too? That's not going to break my shoulder.
Yeah.
And then the last one is then I start to add rehab on top of it. So primarily, this is how I approach my injuries, because I like to keep feeling like I'm making progress and I'm not losing, right? It might not be the best for everyone, but I find like this is like a weird thing. I find rehab to be very like boring to me.
Sure.
And if it's boring to me, then I'm not going to do it. So the only way that I keep it exciting is add the boring stuff into my fun stuff.
Yeah.
And you'll see that all the time. You're like, oh, there you go. He's adding it finally.
Yeah. No, I think that's an important factor of like, so let me touch. When you're talking about the adjusting part of your plan, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I think that's really important. Like in rehab period is like, okay, like shoulder can't do certain things. Legs are fine.
Yeah,
like
legs are fresh. Why am I going to
use the legs to make them feel like they're still doing something, and they don't have to halt something. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes is that someone comes across injury and they're like, I can't work out it. Period.
Yeah, it blows my mind.
And it's like typically like it's gonna be like one side, like it's gonna be like your one knee, one shoulder, whatever. That's where you're bugging you. It's like you still have all these other. You still have two legs. You still have another arm. Like you can still do stuff. It's just you have to modify for whatever body part hurts. Like, right. Like, I think that's a really important principle. It's like
the adjust.
Yeah. Don't just hyper fixate on the one thing that's injured.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, adjust for that. You can still do a lot of other stuff. You kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like most of the time, ones that can't read the check engine, they accept and then they stop.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, this is my framework. It tends to work. So I can still do pull-ups, and I'm doing a lot of pull-ups, and I'm still like, I've registered like 9 other world records that I want to attempt. So it's been working for me somehow, but you got to have some good people around you.
Yes, absolutely.
So what are your thoughts around like just not accepting it too early?
So what do you mean?
Like the movement capacity? Because I see a lot of times. So I'm thinking about all my clients, and they're like, my knee hurts. No legs anymore. And you're like, what? Like that always freaks me out a little bit. I think you could still work a lot of your legs without moving the knee.
Yeah.
But they blanket the whole thing.
Right.
Or it could be on the arm thing. Yeah. No more arms.
Yeah.
So
you're saying like if they accept that mentality quickly. I mean, I think that mentality period shouldn't be accepted.
Okay.
Right. I think when you think, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you say accept, it's like, okay, there's something going on that I have to address it and I can't do certain things. I think that's the mentality that needs, like, that's fine. Like, you're limited.
Yeah.
Change it. Like, you got to figure out why you're limited.
Yeah.
And not just blanket it and be like, I'm done. I'm done with this now.
Or I'm just going to go surgery right off the bat.
Right.
Which is why I think this is such a critical piece.
Yeah.
But that is my framework. Is there any framework that you wanted to adjust or like move around?
Yeah.
For you?
So I'm glad you kind of touched on. So like I want to touch a little bit about like the 4 pillars of health, which is kind of like the foundation of things, and then get into like kind of the framework, or what we call like the rehab continuum of like figuring out like where someone is at when they're injured.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I mean, going back to 4 pillars of health, you really kind of touched on it, right? You got nutrition, you got sleep, stress management, and then movement. So like movement, exercise, being active. And it's like, to be fairly healthy, like you really want to be good at like 3 of the 4. Like it'll be rare to find someone that's like, I'm excellent in all 4 categories. That'll be pretty rare.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not doable, but it's just rare.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you want to make sure that foundation is set for someone. It's like, if they come to you, they're dealing with an injury and they're like, oh yeah, my nutrition's crap and I get like 4 hours of sleep a day. It's like, you're already fighting such a large uphill battle.
Rehab can only do so much for you.
Right. And so it's like, you got to make sure that like, try to get those things under control, or not under control, but like working on them. Bring them to someone's mind, because like a lot of times like I know it's sleep. Like, I mean, sometimes people like, I feel like people brag sometimes like how busy they get. They're like, oh, I was so busy, I only got 5 hours of sleep last night.
Right, 100%.
Sorry,
dude.
No, you're fine. And right, it's like they kind of brag on like, oh, I'm so like I don't get like, I'm so busy that I'm missing these basic things I need in my life, like sleep. And so like a lot of times they don't understand. It's like, well, sleep is like when you get like a lot of recovery when you're sleeping. Like sleep is really important. Like you need really at least 7 hours of sleep. You're not getting that. It's like your body's kind of, it's not going to be, you're not going to have the capacity to recover from this injury as if that compared to like if you had that amount of sleep. Same thing for nutrition. Like if you're not giving yourself the right amount of protein, like eating a well-balanced diet, eating lots of fruits and veggies, all that kind of stuff. It's like you're fueling your body with bad things. Like that's what you're fueling your body. Your body needs the fuel to recover. So it's like you're putting in subpar fuel to try to come back from an injury. It's like, that's 100%. Really hard.
Yeah. So why I asked this question is because you've seen physical therapists and you're in a different branch. I feel like you're taking care of a lot of different people. I've seen 350-pound people come in with a shoulder injury and they're addressing rehab. And I'm like, wait, you probably need to address other things more than that, dude. Like you need to do the rehab for sure, but I would put more effort in trying to get the 350 down to 300, to 250 to 280. Yeah, and also address that, like, and then you have a person like Kyler that you're rehabbing, and obviously there's not a lot of science on this right now at the moment. If Kyler was 350 pounds and going through the same rehab protocol that you had, would it be the same? And by the way, like long story short, he ruptured his Achilles tendon. He's walking and jumping at like 5 months. He's walking much faster than that too.
Yeah. No.
Would they be the same? 350-pound Kyler or beast mode Kyler going into this? Right?
I mean, you're right. I mean, like that does make a big difference of like kind of where you're starting. Right. But I mean, that's why like whenever I'm working with someone, I always bring up those 4 pillars. Just kind of be like, kind of like a check, like, hey, where are you at with these things? And if they're like, oh, I'm not doing so good there, I'm like, okay, well, let me help you understand like why sleep is going to be important for you if you want to get this, like whatever X, Y, and Z we're working on better. Right. So you got those 4 pillars, right? So that's kind of like the foundation. And then because you asked me like, hey, well, what's like my process of going through things? A lot of times I think of like what we call like the rehab continuum, right? So that it's a continuum, like you can be anywhere on this timeline, but typically it's like, okay, so you have pain, mobility, stability, strength, speed, power, performance, right? Like that's kind of the continuum. Most of the time, injuries, you kind of enter that phase at pain, right? So it's like first thing first. All right, let's assess what tissue is kind of under attack, whatever tissue is causing the pain. Let's start working on that. Let's fix that. Let's get rid of the pain. Let's help manage the pain levels, get that down, right? And then it's like after that, like once pain kind of is no longer a factor, like you can really dive into this other stuff and like really get a good picture of like how that person moves. Like what's their mobility like? Do they have adequate mobility? So like let's think like back pain, right? So back pain goes away. let's look at, okay, how well does their back move? How well do their hips move? Are they tight in their quads, hip flexors? Are they tight in their hamstrings, posterior chain? You get a picture like, okay, like someone has a limiting factor in that. It's like, let's start addressing that, right? And then you kind of make sure that they have the mobility, and then you look at, okay, they have X amount of range of motion. How well are they controlling that range of motion? Can you put them in kind of tough positions and like have them hold that and see how well they can stabilize their body? Okay, they could. They have that stability, and then you can really start getting into like that strength, speed, power. And again, a lot of this, it's a continuum, right? So it's not just like you're only in pain, you're only in this. Like you kind of go back and forth. You kind of flow through this continuum. But it's like that's kind of my process, right? Is like,
I do like that.
The assessment is really important, because like the assessment, it's like right off the bat, like I'll be like, okay, where are we at? Like, are we in this pain stage, and we got to address pain? Is pain the most the thing that I like is, we call it like the limiting factor. What's your limiting factor? Is it pain? Okay, if it's pain, address pain. No, okay, is it mobility? All right, address the mobility. Is it stability? Stability is it, or is it a strength issue? All right, let's address strength, if strength is your limiting factor.
This is so good. I'm glad you addressed pain, because it just blossomed over it. Because in the past, when I had pain, I didn't have any methods to alleviate the pain that was like manual or mobility or soft tissue. I just chug the beer, you know what I mean? Or I'll eat the Cheetos, or like some people do the drugs. They just pop pills all day to just reduce the pain. And then you just get into this, it's almost like a fork in the road, right? So like you get into this bad scenario. This is why I wanted Jacob in here, because I forgot about that. You know, I don't experience the heavy pain anymore because right away I have 2 or 3 tools that I know that's going to like at least get me to walk with my back tweak. Or at least get me to like be able to move my arms around freely without really like thinking about pain. So I'm glad that you attacked the pain point, because I forgot about that. Like, it's almost, I've take all of my current skills for granted, all the soft tissue stuff that I've worked on, that I'm always going right into stability phase. So that's why I love these little assessments.
Pain is. I mean, it goes back to like, why are people afraid of injuries? Because like pain is very limiting. It puts you in a dark place. It could put you in a dark place pretty quick, right? I mean, I've had my share of like I've experienced back pain, and like even as a therapist, like I know what to do. But, like I remember one time I had like I just tweaked my back, right? And it was like I had a hard time walking around, rolling out of bed, and like very quick, like even though I knew it wasn't serious, I was like, man, should I go to the emergency room? Like this hurts. This is so bad.
The first back,
and like it puts you in a really dark place pretty quickly. So it's like pain can be like a really big limiting factor that needs to be addressed. And sometimes people just don't know how to figure it out, right? Because like I would say you're pretty good at, like when you have pain, you're like, okay, like you find out it's like, oh, I get, like you said, I get pain in this motion. Okay, I'm just gonna stop doing that. A lot of times people don't know that, like they have pain, they're just always constantly in pain because they just keep re-aggravating whatever hurts, because they don't know what motion is kicking it off sometimes. So sometimes people need help doing that. Like for example, like I've worked with people, like I remember there's this one lady I worked with after she had like rotator cuff surgery, right? And we're like fairly far out from the rehab plan, but like she'd still have pain every once in a while and like very consistently. And she would ask me like, well, what am I doing? Like I'm not doing like you I know I'm not doing the stuff that you and the doctor have asked me not to do, meaning like no heavy lifting, no pushing, no like not really placing stuff on the, like they're doing all the stuff that they're not told. And I was like, well, like there's a lady, she's from back east, she talked with her hands a lot. I was like, you realize like when you talk, you're doing like this over and over and over again. And it's like you're just like that's why
overuse,
like you're just like unknowingly using that arm, and it's just a little more than it can tolerate at the time, and that's why you kind of it's always getting this pain. Now
there's athletes that come in that gets the minor injuries to get major injuries, is they perceive that, oh, maybe if I just keep doing it, it'll feel better. You know, or it's like, I'm like, it's bigger than that. I think you need to assess it a little bit more. You know, and then over time they're like, my shoulders are blowing out. I was like, dude, it's because you thought just going through the load.
That whole mentality, like no pain, no gain, like that's such an old school mentality, and it's just like I think it's caused, I don't know, maybe it hasn't been too good for the mentality of people we work with, I think. It might work for some, you know, but then it creates a lot of damage.
the whole thing of like a lot of times when people can't do overhead, I'll have them do it this plane.
Yeah.
For months, and then I'll reintroduce it, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, it doesn't hurt anymore."
Right. So that goes back, right? So like addressing the pain, figure out what's causing the pain. A lot of times these overuse injuries, it's just certain repetitive motion, load, whatever is causing it. All right, so find that out. Okay, let's kind of back off that a little bit. You can work on other things in the meantime, and then but the thing is you want to gradually reintroduce that movement again. Like once you kind of target that tissue, get that tissue a little more stronger, a little more resilient, gradually start to ramp back up, right?
So good.
I think we touched on it. One of the biggest mistakes is typically people are like, okay, pressing hurts, I'll stop pressing.
Yeah.
Couple weeks go by, they're like, oh, my shoulder feels fine. They jump right back into pressing, and guess what? That pain it's just like, hey, I'm here again. Yeah. And they're like, shoot, all right, well, recovery didn't work when really the recovery was just rest.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you got to work on find some of these things, start loading in different ways that aren't painful, and then reintroduce that problem movement, I guess you could say.
That's one of the reasons why I like injuries, is because it forces you to do a movement that your body probably needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So for us, one of our guilty parts is we like to just go onto the barbell and start doing pull-ups, and we neglect to do all of the ring work.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And actually the ring work is actually more fundamental than the pull-up, I would argue. So we've neglected all of that, and we go into the cool thing, because if you can do a pull-up, you're cool.
Yeah.
If you do rings, you're not that cool. But dude, if you do a ring workout, I think some of the ring workouts, I was like, I'd rather do a pull-up.
Yeah.
Because it's working different muscle groups that we just neglect.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that for sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to add one more thing, because we were talked about. I think injuries are a sport itself. Okay. And let me explain. If you go into this sport more fitter, you're going to handle it better.
Right.
So like, what happens if I get injured as I'm losing weight, as I'm getting fitter? I was like, that's better, because you're going into an experience that requires you to be resilient. It requires you to be fit, and like, it's perfect. It might happen. It might not happen. My goal here is not to make it happen, but who would you want? Like, what type of person do you want to approach this experience or this sport? Do you want a fitter person, or do you want a person that's not fit?
Right.
And I think that's why you see some of the best athletes that go through these Achilles tears and like knee problems, they come right back. It's because prior to that, they were already fit.
Sure. Yeah.
What's the value in that for you?
Yeah. I mean, again, like the healthier you are, theoretically, the healthier you are, the better your bodies adapt to handle stress. Right. So like, just think of injuries as stress.
Yeah.
Amount of stress on the body. It's like the larger your foundation is to manage stress, the better. Right?
Yeah.
Right. 100%. I mean that's how I kind of view it.
I love it. Okay. We had covered a bunch of stuff. So if you guys are injured and you're feeling like all hope is lost, which is actually kind of what I felt like the first injury that I had. Don't believe me when I say like, I'm always happy about injuries. It just gets better over time. Like I'm the first time it was like 2 months of depression, right? And then the second time it was 1 month of depression. And then the third time it was 1 week. And then it turned into 1 day. And now it's to like 1 hour, you know, and you have to go through that. But the only way you can actually get to that 1 minute depression is to not really just like avoid the injury, but lean into it.
Yeah.
And if you lean into it with like curiosity and just understand and acceptance in a way, like, wait, maybe my body is weak in certain areas.
Sure.
Maybe I am not addressing my sleep patterns. Maybe I need to address that. I need to go see a therapist, see a trainer, someone with an experienced eye. That's when you really start to grow in your fitness. That's when you can really like spring back your perception that you're going backwards, and it actually slings you way forward.
Yeah.
So injuries, I love it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd agree with that. And I know we're kind of wrapping up, but I think you touched on one thing that I think one more thing we should touch
Sure,
on.
sure.
You talk about depression, right? Like injury.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing when dealing with the injury is that depression happens a lot of times because you get taken away from your community.
Mm-hmm.
So think of like an athlete, like they can't practice with their team.
Yeah.
Or like for you, people coming in here, they get injured, they feel like I can't go work out.
Yeah.
It's like it's really important to kind of address that.
Yeah.
And make sure that you still connected with your community and adapt.
Yeah.
Like, so like, hey, you can't do X, Y, and Z at the gym with the group classes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Modify it. Still go and find ways to modify it for the most part. And I think that's something the coaches here, like you guys do an excellent job at.
Yeah.
Is like,
you
can't do this. Still come in.
I got you.
Your arms, your shoulders bothering you. Like, okay, well, like let's make sure let's work on that.
Yeah.
But you can still come in and do like we'll modify it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like that sense of community is so important. So like make it like I think you guys do an excellent job of like making sure that even if you're dealing with something, like you still have that community around you. Because a lot of people when they get injured, that community just gets taken away.
Yeah, they get taken and they stop working out,
Yeah.
which has all this like dopamine release and all the feel good hormones just all of a sudden disappear overnight.
Yeah.
And 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another whole deep dive.
Yeah, it is.
All right. You ready for this one? Hopefully you had some time to marinate. At the end of every podcast episode, we like to collect questions.
Yeah.
And because I think questions can really change your life, especially if you collect some good ones.
Yeah.
So what is your most favorite question that you've ever been asked? And one, I'd love for you to answer it.
Yeah. I'll pose it to you and I'll have I'm gonna have you answer it too.
Flip-flop. Okay.
Yeah. But like after all is said and done, like who do you want to be remembered as? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I come to this. I was listening to a podcast today, and they're talking about like the Nobel Peace Prize, right? Like we think of that like, oh, that's such a great prize. But Nobel, the guy, he's actually one of the guys that invented dynamite.
Yeah.
Right. And like it was funny because I was listening to it. It was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Some guys were talking about it. It was it kind of piqued my curiosity on this. But like, so Nobel, he invented dynamite, right? So like, think of like hand grenades, all this stuff. But like, he accidentally got reported that he died. It was like, I think it was like his brother or something died, and then some news article posted that it was actually Nobel guy died, and they labeled him as the Merchant of Death. What? And he saw that, and he was like, I don't remember that like that. So then he came up with like the Nobel Peace Prize, and now what do we think of when we think of Nobel? It's like, oh, Nobel Peace Prize, like this is like
they changed the world,
right?
For the better,
right? So like it's like. That's how he wanted to be remembered. He didn't want to be remembered as this merchant of death. So that's why I asked you. Is like, okay, like how do you want to be remembered?
This is so good. Now, I might answer it a little bit differently. Okay,
go for it.
Because I think this answer or this question created serious purpose for me, which is super amazing. But it also created serious depression because thinking that I have somewhat of a control to this, and I'm going to be known for something. So past me, if you asked me like what I'd be known for, I'd be like, oh, I want to be able to create a dent in obesity and diabetes, and that's super and it's still a big driver for me. But I also know now that if I stretch time to 200 years, to 400 years, to 300, to 1,000 years, they're not going to remember me. You know what I mean? So there's that sense of peace of knowing that, like, why am I even doing that? So now it gets me into the present. I like to think about death a lot.
Okay.
Now I think of it as just art. One of the big things, I mean, we're talking about Nobel Peace Prize, like the Sistine Chapel, like the big cathedral. And there's guys on there that were just laying the bricks down for their whole life, and they never got to paint it. Yeah. And then there's people that were painting it, but they never got to paint the other areas of it.
Yeah.
And then and then they die, and then another artist will start painting it. Right. So I like to think of my life now as just like I'm painting something. I'm part of an art that I'm never going to experience. It could be the Sistine Chapel. It could be something pretty great. So it just gives me more of enough purpose to continue to just like step through, but less anxiety thinking that my work is going to be the work that's going to change everything in the world. Right. So such a good question, man.
Yeah.
How did you answer it? How did you answer yours, by the way?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always, for me, it's like, I mean, I want other people to think of me as like, caring, helpful, like help impact their lives in some way.
Yeah.
But to me, it always boils down to like my family, right? Like, was I a diligent, supportive husband and father?
Yeah.
That created an environment for them to excel. Like those that's who like I mean that those are going to who people are going to remember us the most. And it's like, okay, am I doing enough for them?
I love it. At the end of the day, I like that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, those are going to probably be your greatest impacts.
Yeah.
And dude, there's something more. It's easier to focus on that than there's like, oh, I want to help 1 million people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think one, if you want to affect 1 million people, you probably can.
Yeah.
Right. And that's your focus. And you'll probably be impactful in that. But I've also seen the strategy of like, if I just impact this one person, that one person's going to affect 1 million.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's like, just be the best person you possibly can.
Yeah.
And equip the person right in front of you to do the best.
Yeah.
I think theoretically they're doing the same. They're doing the same work. They're just focusing slightly different. One's more larger picture, one's more very small picture.
Yeah.
This is why I like to do this ending questions.
Yeah.
It just makes you think a little bit.
Different twist.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, guys. So if you guys like this episode, you'll probably like this episode that's up here. Not sure what's going to pop on, but you'll probably like it because the YouTube algorithm loves to put on things that you probably might enjoy. I'll see you guys later. Peace.